Hello everyone and welcome to this brand new tutorial. Today we're gonna go and have a look into feathers. I can remember the first times I had to make feathers in Blender. It was very overwhelming. I had absolutely zero clue how to get started on those, so I just did some random stuff. So I just revised it a little bit, got back into those feathers with the skills that I learned over the last years. It turns out it's actually not that hard. So in this tutorial I will show you a nice and easy way to create feather systems, combine different types of feather systems, low poly, high poly, ways in between that you can personalize. So it's gonna be easy, customizable, and we're gonna be working in cycles to create some fluffy feathers and also some flappy feathers that you can see there in the bottom. So let's get right into it. We're gonna start off with the low quality feather first, and then we're gonna make a high quality feather. And the reason why we're making two versions is because I want to show you that we can create them both ways depending on how much details you need in your final render. Alright, so if you have a very close-up shot, you need some more details, so we at that point need to actually work with some more detail as well. It's as easy as that. Alright, so I'm gonna first start off with a low quality feather. Right, and I'm gonna enable my screencast keys real quick, like that. Let's enable that. There we go. And I'm just gonna add a plane. Right, so not every, but a lot of low poly objects will start with a plane, at least when it is pretty much as flat as a plane, right? A feather is very flat, so we can get away with a lot here. So we're gonna just scale this down in edit mode in the Y direction a little bit, like that. And I'm gonna go to top view, and I'm gonna swipe this window to the left and set the right one to shader editor. There we go. Add a new material, and let's select the principle to press Ctrl T. That will add our image texture. If it doesn't work, go to edit preferences and search for your node wrangler. It is very nice to have this enabled because you can just use shortcuts like Ctrl T. So enable that, save your preferences, and close it. And select your principles, hit Ctrl T, and this will appear. Beautiful. Now let's open up our feather texture. I named it something crazy. There we go. This is like the third search result from Google. If I typed in feathers, this is the one that I mean it works, I guess. So I'm gonna swipe that in, and I'm gonna go to UV editor there, and I'm gonna hit U in my left window and project from view. Right, and then in the right one, in the UV editor, I'm gonna scale everything up so it covers the feather nicely, like that. Beautiful. Alright, so let's go into rendered view and see what this looks like. There we go. Little render view icon, and set this to cycles right away because I like cycles. There we go. Now we're gonna go into shader editor, and we have to fix some kind of alpha, right? Because we want this white part to be gone. But this texture doesn't have an alpha map. It is not a PNG, it's a JPEG. So I'm gonna swipe the color into the alpha, and then hit Shift A and search for a color ramp. And then I'm just gonna swipe this across each other so it inverts pretty much. Swipe this to the right, and I'm gonna play around with this color ramp up to the point where I'm satisfied with my alpha map, right? And I really don't mind lacking some of these details right there. I just really don't, because this is gonna be like the low detail, the low poly version of the feather anyway, right? And I'm gonna increase the roughness a little bit so everything is a little more visible when we angle this as well, so the light doesn't just remove all of those details. So this is pretty much all we need, and what I'm gonna do actually is add a few edge loops like that, and one there as well, so later on we have at least some geometry to work with if we want to move this feather, for example, or if you want to display some parts of it. So this is looking fine for a low poly. You could even add like a little ridge in the middle if you'd like to add some nice height for the middle part of the feather, but I'm not even gonna do that, right? This is gonna be my low poly feather. Beautiful. I'm gonna go into top view, and I'm just gonna worry about my high poly feather, or high poly, high detail, right? And the way I'm gonna do that is with particle systems. So I'm gonna press Shift A, I'm gonna add a curve, and I'm just gonna add a path, Alright, so move that out of our initial cube. And actually, let's delete that default cube. I should have done that a long time ago. Delete that. Select your path. And I'm going to scale it down so it's about the same size as my low poly feather. Alright, apply the scales and transforms. And I'm just going to reposition the origin real quick. There we go. And I'm going to add some thickness here. This is going to be like the feather inner part, like the hard part of the feather, right? So I'm gonna give this some thickness by extruding this a little bit out, like this. And I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm gonna select some points of my curve, and I'm gonna switch the radius to a lower radius because I want this to be like it's gonna be smaller at the end, so we're gonna just decrease that radius there. And that's already looking quite nice. Alright, so I may actually do that with the first point as well. So we have some starting point and an end point as well. And maybe just move this a little bit to the left, like that. Beautiful. This is going to be our feather start point. Beautiful. Alright, so right away, we have to think about the geometry of our inner part. Because we're going to be adding this as a particle system later on to a mesh that we want those feathers to appear on, which means that there's going to be a lot of these things on our mesh. We have to make this as low poly as possible while remaining the details as well. Alright, so we have got the resolution on 4. If I swipe this down, pretty much all that happens is it's going to remove some resolution in this circle, right? So if I set this to 0, it's going to be a cube. Set this to 1, it's going to be like a hexagon. And it's just gonna add resolution. So leaving this as 1 at 1 is probably gonna work fine. And right away I'm gonna press R, X, and rotate this 90 degrees. Actually, yeah. So I want a flat side on the right and a flat side on the left. So this is working fine and it's quite low detail. Right, so now if I convert this object, I want this to be a mesh. And if we go to edit mode now, we have a lot of geometry in this length direction. All right, so I'm going to go to top view and I'm going to go enable X-ray mode. And I'm just going to select some of these parts that I don't need really. All right, so we have too much geometry, so I'm just going to select every other vertex loop, edge loop, and I'm just going to dissolve that later. Because we want to stay as low poly as possible still. And that's what you want to do with everything that you're gonna be pretty much using in a particle system, is you want that base object to be low poly. So go to edge select mode, right mouse, and dissolve edges. There we go. I think we can get away with this. We could even remove some more, but I'm just gonna leave it like this. Alright, so let's now go out of the X-ray mode. So how do we get some kind of feather look on this now? Well, we're gonna add some hairs. And before we do that, I'm actually going to let's see, actually I may have a different idea on the spot. I'm gonna press RX90. So I'm actually going to go back into those pointy bits on the outside. And the reason I will explain very soon. I'm going to press 2, double click on this edge loop and add a new object data property. And I mean add a new vertex group and name this right feathers, right hairs, and assign. Then double click on the left part plus, and let's name this left hairs and assign that there. Beautiful. So now, let me save this as feather system. And so now we can actually add a new particle system, hit that plus sign, and we can now just select hair, and let's decrease that hair length a little bit, it's quite long, and we're gonna hit that render tab, and actually we don't need to do that yet. We're just gonna go into the vertex groups, hit the density, and let's select the left hairs first. Alright, so it's now only gonna be on that left side. And we can actually set the source to emit from vertices. And now it's just gonna emit from the vertices we assigned to that group only. Right, so that's gonna be straight to the left now. Right, so I'm gonna go into edit mode. I'm going to select this top left vertex, hold control and select the top right there. And it's gonna look at the bottom to how many vertices we have. So we have 25 selected, which means that there are 25 in that in this vertex group as well. And we can use that. So we're gonna go to the particle properties and set the number to 25. And in order to appear these hairs, to make these hairs appear on every vertex, we need to disable random order. Right, so now we have hairs on each and single vertex, which means that we have the lowest amount of hairs as possible. So to make this look a little bit better later on, let me increase the hair a little bit. We are just gonna add some children particles and set that to interpolated. And it's gonna be appearing in between of our base set of hairs. And we can swipe this up and down how much we want. I'm gonna set this to 30 and match the render amount. There we go. Now let's go into render view and actually see how the thickness of these hairs are. So the base thickness is way too much. So I'm going to go to hair shape and set the diameter to like 0.05. That's a little bit too little, I guess. 0.1 perhaps, and 0.05 for the tip. Something like that. And we can set the we can always increase the display amount, right? So I'm going to set this to 50, for example. So now I'm just going to shape these particles. So I'm going to the particle edit, and I'm just going to shape this like a feather, right? So pretty much going to try to follow this shape a little bit, perhaps. So everything has to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to go into that length brush and just lengthen it a little bit. So everything needs to be a little bit longer, like that. Beautiful. Now we can even, let's see, try to get this messy bit a little bit back. So if we swipe this there, for example, and actually we don't even need those bottom two vertices. So what I'm going to do is go to my object data properties, select those bottom three vertices, and I'm just gonna remove those from that particle group. All right, so let's see if that's actually, yes, so that's good. Go into particle edit, and we may actually have to, we should have set this to 23 now. So I'm just gonna delete that, hit plus, and set this to the 0 particle settings and change the number to like 23. And actually we deleted 3 vertices, so we need this to set at 22. And let's set that vertex group back to the left hairs. There we go. Beautiful. So let's now particle edit this and make this look a little bit better. Like that. Increase the length once again. Where we need length, we're gonna increase that as well. Something like that. And then just comb it into the shape you pretty much want for your feathers. So I want it to connect in the middle at least somehow. Alright, so I'm gonna do it like this and just have some kind of chaos going on, right? Nature is very organic. So let's see how that looks. That's looking quite decent actually. I like the way that looks. So I'm gonna now add a new particle system, and I'm gonna match that first one, so this one, this particle settings. So I'm gonna set that to this one as well. And now we want this to be set to the right hairs, and we're just gonna be particle editing this once again. Alright, so I'm gonna increase some length right there and everywhere, actually a little bit of length, and then just comb it. And this is gonna be to the left a little bit, and I guess we forgot to assign to remove those 3 vertices from this particle group. That is a stupidity by me. So I'm going to go into that edit mode, select those 3, and this is going to be the right hairs, remove. Beautiful. Let's go back in the particle settings. And let's assign the right hairs now, like that. All right, particle edit. Increase that length, and we are doing each of these steps a few times, just because I sometimes decide to tweak things on the go, which sometimes just needs to be reverted. Right, so let's just drag this to the right a little bit. So we've got some beautiful hairs there. And let's make some chaos. Let's see if that matches the other side. Pretty much, right? Maybe we need it to be a little bit longer still. Add some length. Beautiful. And let's comb that down a little bit. So you can make this as crazy looking as you want. There we go. This is a beautiful looking feather. At least I think so. So we're gonna go and tweak a few of these settings maybe. So for example, we can add some randomness by going into the roughness. We can even add some clumping, because that is something though that's going on for sure. So we can increase the clump, and we can add some clump noise as well if we want, and decrease this a little bit actually. Add some noise, and we can change that shape to pretty much the end of those hairs, right? And maybe even decrease this a little bit. Clump noise is not what I want. So let's see something like this, a little bit more clumping, like that. Beautiful. We could also use a clump curve, which will basically allow us to define the clumping ourselves, but that's not necessary right now. So this is already looking quite nice, and I'm gonna add some random roughness as well, right? So our hair is going to appear a bit more random, and with hair I mean the feather hairs, right? So you can imagine that if we have our final particle system, and I'm actually gonna remove the roughness a little bit as well. There we go. If in our final system we would, for example, want more feathers, because if we're gonna be scattering around the same feather over and over again, you can eventually notice that it's the same feather, right? So an easy way to do that is to just duplicate this and go into particle edit and just change the shape of this feather, make it a little bit more chaotic, for example, like this. Swipe this out a little bit, and then go to the other side as well, go into the particle settings, and just swipe that out a little bit as well. And you could even just move this up and down a little bit, like that, so you don't only have to move it in 2D, you can move it in 3D as well. I could do that with the first one as well, move this down and up a little bit perhaps, and for this one as well. Beautiful. Right, so we're gonna have some 3D looking feathers, and I'm just gonna duplicate this one more time, and let's go into the particle settings. Oh, small mistake. Particle edit, and let's just move this around a little bit more, down a bit more, like that. Second one too, there we go. Move this a little bit, maybe make it more chaotic. All right there. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Something like that. That's looking like 3 separate feathers. So I'm going to go to top view, and I'm just going to assign some kind of material to those feathers. All right, so what I'm going to do is create 2 materials for each feather. One is going to be the base, and the second is going to be assigned to those hairs. There we go. So we're going to first assign the base. So what does the base of feather look like? It's basically, I'm not even sure. It is a low roughness material, and we could actually try to make it look like this one a little bit with a Fresnel node. So I'm just gonna decrease the roughness a little bit and change the color to something a bit more dark. And you can see that the hairs instantly get that materials as well. So that's something we have to tweak later. And now if you add a Fresnel, I'm not sure if I say that correctly, and Ctrl-Shift-click that, you can see that we can get some kind of an edge going, right? So we can use that in our color by adding a mix RGB, swiping that in front of the color ramp, connecting it to the color. Let's reconnect that and use the Fresnel for the vector. There we go. So let's say second color is going to be black, or the first color is going to be black and the second is going to be white. Let's see which one looks better. Let's see the reference. So we need those. Well, it doesn't really matter, I guess. So we're just gonna add a color ramp in between and just define how far we want that whiteness to go in and how far we want that black to go out. All right, something like this. And we could even change the index of refraction on that Fresnel, so it looks a little bit different. There we go. And I think that is fine. It may be a little bit too dark though, so let's increase that a little bit like that. And let's just decrease the roughness a bit more. There we go. Now let's go into the hair systems. And let's actually, and this is going to change for each and single one of them because we use the same base, the same foundation for each of our particle settings, right? So particle settings, you can see how often it's used with the little number after it. So 6, because we have 3 hair systems, or sorry, 3 feathers, and each of those has 2 whole halves of hair systems as well, right? So we're going to go to hairs, to the render tab, and we want this material to be the hairs. Beautiful. Now I want this first material and this one to match the first one we actually defined. So select those two blank ones, hold shift, select the one you already assigned a material to, Ctrl L, link materials, and there we go. Now let's go to top view. Let's go to our shader editor and we're going to select hairs. We're going to delete the principled BSDF, shift A, search for hair, principled hair BSDF, and connect that to the surface. And right away we got some kind of a hair texture. I usually increase the radial roughness a little bit and the roughness itself a little bit as well. There we go. And the best way to see the hair, the way the feathers look, is by adding an HDRI real quick. So I'm going to delete the default light. I'm going to go into my world settings, color, environment, texture, and let's open up an HDRI. And I want some kind of a nature looking HDRI. So perhaps the Whipple Creek gazebo. You can download these for free from polyhaven.com. So make sure to check those out. And that just allows us to get some kind of a lighting going on in our scene with some reflections and stuff as well. Right, so I'm gonna hide that background in our render settings. Film transparent. There we go. Now let's go to top view. And let's tweak the material of those hairs a little bit. Alright, the hairs. I want some kind of a noisy colors going on. So not everything is plain and brown. So I'm gonna hit Shift A and search for a noise texture. And swipe that into the color. Shift A, color ramp, in between of those. And then we can set the color. So I want this white part to be a little bit more brownish, a little bit darker. So I'm going to try to match this one a little bit without all of the white. And I'm going to swipe them a little bit closer. Control Shift, click the color ramp so we can see how it looks. And then we can just try and tweak it a little bit. Right, so increase the scale perhaps. And I'm going to select my noise texture, hit Ctrl T. And I'm gonna set my texture coordinates to object, I think. There we go. So we can see that noise texture a little bit better. And increase that scale perhaps a little bit. And then we can tweak those colors. Alright, something like that. Set the scale to 1.5 perhaps. And then we can just set the colors to how we want them. Alright, so perhaps some kind of darker brown. And we can even add a third color, maybe some lighter color somewhere in between. So it's just gonna look a little bit nicer. Like so. Something like that. And now each and every single feather is gonna look the same. And that is not at all what we want. Because we want each and single feather that we're going to be adding, we want them to be a little bit different in the texturing as well. Shift A and search for an object info, because we want to get the info of an object, so it is a little bit different than the one before, right? So we can just swipe the random value of the object info into the W, and it's going to change the value of that noise texture, the W value, a little bit each and every time. Right. That is looking quite alright. And you can even add like a texture of a feather if you want to use that on your hairs as well. And in that case, you will just use an image texture instead of a noise texture. Alright, so you can use whatever you want for the materials there. You could also use a wave texture. So if you change that to wave texture, for example, and then just connect that there, you can see that we can get some very different results going on. Distort that a little bit perhaps. And we could even add some details to that texture. Remember to connect your mapping. So you get something like that. So there's a lot of things that you can actually try to achieve with these textures. Alright, some different looks. Play around with all of these settings a little bit more as well. Maybe set this to B-spline so it's a little bit more softer. And like that you can just try and pretty much create custom looking textures on your feathers. Beautiful. So it would look something like that. I'm gonna Ctrl Z this a few times because a nice texture. I like some soft kind of feel, and maybe this looks cool as well. Nah. Right, so I'm just gonna stick with my soft looking feathers. Alright, so it is quite bright right now, but what we can change actually is add a very quick mix RGB in between, set that second color to something we want, and then just set the mix to color, swipe this all the way up. So now we have our noise texture still going on in there, but we can just set that second color to something we like a little bit more. We can even make it more dark. You can also try to set this to multiply to make your entire feather darker. I'm just gonna leave this at color, just so we have some initial orange color. And I'm gonna do the same for this feather. Shift A, mix RGB. I don't really like the whiteness, so I'm gonna set this to color as well and swipe this up and just set that second color to something that matches the other feathers, right? So this is gonna be one system. It's gonna be on the same object, so we need these feathers to be at least somewhat similar, right? So we're gonna be seeing me trying to match those colors. I need to add hue saturation. Let's try a bright contrast first. Just make this a little bit darker. All right, so that's what I was afraid of. I'm gonna delete that. Shift A, mix RGB, set that to darken or multiply. Let's see which one works, and set this to black. And let's see, I just want the entire feather to be a little bit darker so it matches the rest. Something like that. So now they have a very similar colors. I'm going to go into my feathers, my base material, and I think it has to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to set this to black, somewhat black at least, and set the second one to a little bit darker as well. Like that. Looking good. Maybe we can even increase the roughness once again. Like that, and let's try to decrease that index of refraction a little bit. Like so. So we actually have some kind of matching feathers with that texture as well in mind. So you can see that I'm tweaking settings quite often, and that's just because I'm trying to make the best kind of feather system that I can. So Shift A, mesh, UV sphere. This is going to be the object that we're going to be adding our feathers to. And you want to make sure that your origins are at the base of your feathers. And to make sure that this is correct, you can look for the orange dot. I think I already placed them there at some point. But if your origins are not at the correct location, go to edit mode. Select your base point, Shift S, cursor to selected, back to object mode, right mouse, origin to 3D cursor. And do that for the feathers as well. So select that base, Shift S, cursor to selector, origin to 3D cursor. And the same for this one. And the right one as well. There we go. The reason why is because we're going to be scattering these feathers around on our sphere. Which means that they're going to be placed on that sphere by their origin point, right? So they're going to move out from their origin point. So that's why we want this origin point to actually be at the base of that feather. So we're going to go to sphere, particle systems, hit that plus sign, hair, and let's decrease that size a little bit. Like that, something like that. And let's actually set that render to object. And let's select, actually, we need a collection, but we can do this one first. So we're going to set that one to be an object, and it's going to be that plane, like that. Right, and we're going to select object rotation as well, just so it makes sure that it remains the same rotation as the object. And then we can just try and sculpt this the way we want. All right, so first things first, I'm going to try to match the scale of my object with the length of the hair. So you can see if I go to particle edit, those hairs are way longer than the feathers are right there. So I'm going to decrease my hair length a little bit and see how far they go. So the top one goes to, let's say, around there. So I could try and match the feather length with that, right? So if I go to my scale of my render object, we can increase that to about there, and now they should match. Yeah, so they're both like at that point. Which means that the feathers are just going to match the hair shape a little bit more, because it's going to be a one-on-one edit. All right, so first things first, I want these base hairs to appear only at a specific location, and I'm going to rotate my entire sphere RY90. Is that the thing? No, RY90 once again. All right, well, it doesn't really matter. We did not have to rotate that at all. So I'm going to go into my object, and I'm going to go into my vertex group, add a new one, name this bait feathers. And I'm actually going to go to weight paint now. And let's actually hide this particle systems for a second. And I just want these hairs to appear right there on the lower part of my sphere. Alright, like that. This is where I want those base feathers to be. For example, if you have a wing that starts from your bird, then the starting point of your wing may have some more fluffy feathers as well. So that is where you, for example, could use something like this. Just like that, and we could blur this a little bit if we want. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, nature is organic and random anyway. So let's go and try to make it happen like that. Let's revision that, and let's go into our vertex group and set that density to the base feathers. So for some reason it doesn't always work when you already assign your material, or sorry, assign your object and stuff, and then add a vertex group. It somehow doesn't really update with the particle system. So what we can do is delete that edit, because for some reason it already edited it somehow. So we delete that edit, and then it will take it into account. And then we only have those feathers on the bottom part of our sphere. So I'm going to go into particle edit, enable X-ray, and I'm just going to sculpt those feathers into what I want them to appear like. Alright, so I want these to be maybe a little bit down, and then I want them to come up here a little bit. Right, so these are going to transfer into those high detailed feathers on the top, something like that. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. So like that, and do the same for pretty much the side view as well. So don't only work in front view. We have to make all sides look good because we're working in 3D. Alright, so we can change this a little bit, and let's see, everything looks quite alright. And now we can actually go to that length and have some variable length. For example, this bottom part, we could just shrink it down a little bit, right? If we want some shorter feathers to appear there, we can shrink that down, and it's going to scale down our feather system. I'm going to grow it a little bit, and something like that. So let's go into our object mode, and let's actually go into rendered view to see how that looks now. Alright, so it's actually added our feathers to the bottom part of our sphere. Beautiful. If you want more feathers, we can simply go to the children, set interpolated, set this to like a low value of 5, and just like that. Beautiful, works like a charm. Alright, and we can have a little bit of scale randomness going on as well, so not all feathers are the same size. And then we can go to clumping, enable clumping a little bit, just because I like clumping. Alright, a little bit of clumping. And then we can change some of the roughness settings to add some randomness to our hairs. Alright, so we can add some uniformness, and that will randomize our hairs a little bit and decrease this. So you can see it's gonna be trying to rotate our hairs a little bit random, try to alter these hair strands a little bit random as well. And then we can also change the random value, and for example reduce that size a little bit, and it's gonna make it even more random. Beautiful, randomness in nature is good. Alright, so now we don't have any feathers for that top part. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Well, we have some high detail feathers for that top part. I just want to show you both of those systems, and this is already looking very nice, in my opinion. Alright, so how do we add a second system? Just add a new particle system. Before we do that, we're going to go into solid view, into weight paint, and I'm just going to add a new vertex group. Call this HQ, high quality feathers. And I'm just gonna paint this top part now. Alright, so the part where we don't have any feathers, I'm gonna paint that with a weight of 1. There we go. Don't forget the top part, otherwise we're gonna have a balding feather sphere. And then we can just apply this all. And I want to make sure that it intersects at least a little bit. Okay, so I want there to be a little bit of an intersection of these hair systems. And make it a little bit random as well, like that. And then we're just gonna add some blur to where those match. Right there. Beautiful. Alright, let's go back to object mode. Let's disable X-ray. And we're actually going to into the particle properties, add a new particle system. And we are going to be using the base foundation of this system. Because the length and stuff was set nicely, they matched correctly. And we actually made the length of these feathers the same, so we can use the length of those hairs beautifully. So we're going to select our sphere, and the first particle settings system we use is 0.004, so we're going to be using that in this one as well. And then make sure to hit that little new particle settings button, so it makes a copy. So that means that if we change something here, it doesn't already change it in the first one as well, right? So now if we set this object to something else, and we need it to be a collection because we have 3 feathers. So select both 3, all 3 I mean, press M, new collection, feathers. That is beautiful. All right, so now let's select render as collection, feathers. There we go, and everything should be nice. I'm gonna select pick random so it doesn't pick the entire system. You can really see that we got some hairy kind of hairs in there now, and it's gonna make our our viewport a little bit more laggy, which is it's not bad, but we can change that later if we want. So now I'm gonna, instead of setting the first density group, I'm just gonna set the HQ feathers, so it's only gonna be appearing on top. And let's see, we can decrease that amount to maybe 300 for now. All right, so that's already making our viewport a lot faster. Go into particle edit, and we can now just shape this. All right, so let's go into that comb X-ray mode, and let's just try to make this nice and beautiful, as we always try to do, right? So this bottom part, I want to kind of match and intersect with that lower part of the feathers as well, and the side view as well. Remember, don't forget about that side view, otherwise it's gonna look weird. Right, so we're gonna be trying to shape this up a little bit nice like that, and we can even add some length on those bottom parts. For example, if we want this to be sticking out a little bit where it matches, make it nice and organic, we can do that. Like that, like that, like that, like that. Just like that. Make it nice and organic looking. We could even curve this down if you want. Why not? Why not? We can do whatever we want in particle settings. Alright, let's see how that looks. Beautiful, beautiful. They may be a little bit long though, those on the bottom part, so these ones are not really good, so I'm gonna decrease that length a little bit, and because they stick out too much for my liking. Something like this is looking way better. Alright, so let's go into rendered view and see how that looks. Rendered view may appear a little bit slow. It's actually okay for me. It's okay, it's okay. So there are obviously not enough hairs, not enough feathers on the top part. So I'm gonna select my system, and I'm just gonna add some more interpolated hairs, feathers, right? So let's set this to like 20 and 20, and we're actually gonna be able to now also, it's gonna lag a little bit. I'm gonna set this down to 10 for now, and we're gonna add some kind of clumping. Actually, we already have that. Let's decrease it a little bit. And we're gonna add some more noise as well. Like that. And some more randomness, for example, as well. I'm gonna decrease that actually. And increase that size. Like that. So it looks a little bit more groomed. That's the word I'm looking for. Let's go into rendered view. See how that looks. And look at that, just like that, we quite managed to achieve a great looking particle settings system of feathers. And if you zoom in right there, you can see that we've got individual feathers going on. Wow! So it is actually high detail. So if you animate this and you zoom in, you actually have some details. Well, this bottom part is gonna lose some detail at some point. Look at that, but the top part, and that's the difference between those two settings, it's way more detailed, catches light from behind and stuff as well. It's an actual hair system. How far we zoom in, it doesn't matter, we see those individual strands, right? So that is something you have to keep in mind with using those different hair systems, right? So there's a low poly, there's a high poly, and there are many ways in between. You can tweak that low poly version into something that looks a little bit more high poly. And you can just make that look however you want, right? So I'm just gonna increase this density a little bit to like 30, because we have the grooming and stuff set up nicely. So now we've got some nice looking feathers. 30 may be too much, may just be too much. So 20 is gonna look fine. And then I'm gonna set up the render. And to do that, I'm just gonna add a simple background and render it out, and then I'll be back. Right, so the render is done, and it turned out very nice in my opinion. We've got a very nice transition between the more low poly and the high poly feathers. It really looks like there's a thick pack of feathers on this object, and you could use this way to add it to any object, whether it's going to be a bird, a sphere, the default cube, or Suzanne. You can use it for anything, and define where which particles would be with the vertex groups. Alright, so you can paint those on, you can change, you can even set the length of those hairs with a separate vertex group. So you can tweak those settings all you want to create your own personalized feather systems. I hope that this helps you in some way or another. I know feathers can usually be a little bit overwhelming to get into. At least it was for me. But ways like this really make it that much easier, and the outcome is great, if you ask me. So I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. If you like this tutorial, if it helped you, it will be awesome if you could either leave a comment or like the video or subscribe even. Any one of those will help me out a lot. And I'll see you in the next one.